Somewhere inside the computer you're using right now, a set of commands written in 1979 is still running. You will never see it. Almost nobody knows it's there. It belongs to a technology the industry spent 20 years trying to kill, and then quietly kept. Forever. That technology is SCSI, and for a while it was the most advanced way to connect anything to a computer on Earth. It was faster than its rivals, it was smarter than its rivals, and it's still lost. To understand why, you have to go back to a problem that almost broke early computing. In the late 1970s, every peripheral spoke its own private language. A hard drive, a tape unit, a scanner, each one needed its own controller card, its own cable, its own driver. A single workstation was a pile of parts that barely tolerated each other, and adding anything new meant opening the machine and fighting it. At a floppy disk company called Shugart Associates, an engineer named Larry Butcher set out to end that war. He built one standardized bus that any device could speak. He called it the Shugart Associates System Interface. When it reached the Standards Committee, they refused to name a standard after a company, so it became the Small Computer System Interface. Butcher wanted people to say the new acronym as sexy. Instead, another engineer in the room read it out loud as SCSI. That name stuck for the next 30 years, but the technology under that unfortunate name was genuinely ahead of everything. It was ratified in 1986. One cable could now run a drive, a scanner, and a backup tape at the same time, with the intelligence living inside each device instead of the computer. Boucher left to found Adaptec, which would own this market for decades. On paper, SCSI had already won. So why is this a story about losing? Because SCSI never failed on the spec sheet. For most of its life, it was the faster option. It lost on something far more human. It lost on how much it asked of the person kneeling behind the machine. Every device on the chain needed its own ID number, set by hand with a tiny jumper. Give two devices the same number, and neither one answered. Every chain needed a plug called a terminator capping the far end, to stop the signal from bouncing back down the wire and scrambling everything. Knock that plug loose, and the whole line went dead, and the entire bus slowed itself to match the oldest device attached, so one aging drive could throttle everything else you owned. Then there was the flaw almost nobody talks about. The original spec was written so loosely that two drives could each perfectly meet the ANSI standard and still refuse to talk to each other. You could do everything right, buy certified hardware, and still end up with a machine that didn't work. When it broke like a ghost story. Drives that vanished and came back. Transfers that corrupted for no reason. Machines that booted fine one morning and refused the next. And there was no plugging in on the fly. To add one device, you shut the computer down, connected everything, powered up, and hoped. On the Macintosh, SCSI became infamous as one of the only ways a normal person could physically damage their own hardware, just by cabling it wrong. So while the engineers admired SCSI, an escape hatch was already opening, and the thing that opened it wasn't faster, it was just easier. What could beat a technology this advanced? Something far dumber that simply deleted the hard part. Engineers took the controller electronics off the separate card and bolted them straight onto the drive itself. One ribbon cable to the motherboard, no ID numbers, no terminator, nothing to configure. They called it Integrated Drive Electronics, IDE. Here's the cruel timing. IDE was born the same year SCSI was ratified, 1986, inside a machine called the Compact Desk Pro 386. A SCSI setup could add $100 or more to a computer. IDE added almost nothing. For a home machine with one or two drives, that choice made itself. SCSI kept the servers and the workstations. IDE took every living room in the world, and by the end of the 90s, even Apple, SCSI's loudest champion, had walked away from it completely. But the deepest irony hadn't landed yet, because someone was about to build the exact thing SCSI had promised, and make a child able to use it. At Intel, an engineer named RJ Pat was worn down by the same mess. What pushed him over the edge wasn't work, it was home. His wife would call him, unable to do something as simple as print a document, because installing anything meant opening the case and rebooting the machine 3 times. He wanted one cable for a zoo of devices, one that anybody could just plug in. That became USB. It carried SCSI's original dream: one bus, many kinds of device, a shared language underneath. But it asked the user for nothing. No IDS, no terminators, no shutdown. You plugged it in and it worked, and Intel deliberately kept it cheap enough that even a mouse could afford the chip inside. The knockout came in 1998. Apple shipped the first iMac with no floppy, no serial port, no SCSI, only USB. It became the best-selling computer on the market, and it dragged the entire industry through that door behind it. Pat retired from Intel with more than 130 patents, and USB went on to connect billions of devices. So that is the death of SCSI. Except SCSI did not die. It did something stranger. It shed its clumsy parallel body and went serial, and it split in 2. In the enterprise it became SAS, still running today inside the servers and storage arrays holding the world's data. On the desktop, its serial descendant became SATA, one clean cable per drive, no IDS, no terminators, nothing to set. And here is the part that almost nobody knows. The command language Larry Boucher designed in 1979 never left. The Linux kernel still uses SCSI commands as the foundation for talking to storage of any kind. So the next time you push a USB drive into a laptop, understand what is happening underneath. The connector is new, the cable is new, but your computer is still speaking a language older than most of the people using it. The jumper you once set by hand is gone. The command it carried is still giving the order.